Alright guys, thanks for coming to the stream. Gonna kick this off with something really simple. Very basic meat seasoning, meat preparation. About 2 hours before you're ready to grill or sear off your steaks. Can help if you take out your steaks and give them the seasoning ahead of time. And what that's going to do, it's going to help you. It's going to help it go ahead and seep into the meat, so you get a more thorough seasoning, as opposed to just having that layer of salt on the outside of your steaks. It's also going to help to draw out a little bit of moisture, help you get a better sear on your steak. And then also, once you do that and you pull out your steaks and you're ready to cook them and everything, you want to make sure you give them a good pat dry, because any moisture is going to hinder your ability to get a good sear on that steak. And whenever you're holding it in your fridge, best thing to store it on is actually going to be a cookie sheet with a rack on it, so it's elevated, so it's getting some good circulation, some air circulation. If you don't have that, what you can also do is, again, keep it on a cookie sheet, but throw down some like paper towels or whatever to help absorb any of the excess moisture that is getting expelled by that salt. Alternatively, if you want to and you're comfortable with it, you can also do a brine. A brine is going to obviously you're going to be soaking your meat in there, but I personally, for something like a steak, prefer not to do a brine. I would rather pre-salt my steaks and just let them go like that. Alright, next up, in the same sort of vein, we're going to talk about fish. So, whenever you get some skin on fish, generally speaking, you really want to try and get a really nice crispy skin on your fish. It's going to help add a nice sort of a contrast of textures to your final product. And the way you want to do that is, same as your steaks, you're going to want to get a sheet tray, like a cookie sheet, with some paper towels on it to help you absorb any excess moisture on your fish. And you're actually going to put it flesh side down, so your skin is up. And you're going to want to give it a good wipe down with a paper towel to make sure it's nice and dry. And ideally, you want to do it about a day ahead of time. And you're going to, again, leave it skin up, and you're going to put it in your fridge. And what it's going to do is the cold air and the airflow sort of in your fridge is going to help to draw that moisture out. And it's going to give you a much easier time searing your skin. And whenever you're searing something, be it steak, be it any sort of protein, or anything really for that matter, your number one enemy is going to be moisture, water moisture. It's going to inhibit your ability to get a nice browning on there. So if you have your fish and say you're planning on cooking that night, there is a workaround for it, and that is, you're going to do the exact same. The first few steps are going to be the exact same. You're going to put your fish flesh side down on a sheet tray, lined with paper towels and everything, and skin side up. And instead of just leaving it in your fridge overnight or however long, you're going to salt your skin. And again, that's going to help to draw out the moisture in your skin. And ideally, I would say do it an hour ahead of time or so, but you can do it as little as 30 minutes or so. And just again, same with the steak. Whenever you do that, you want to make sure you give the skin a nice wipe down after after it's set, because you're gonna want to soak up all that water that's been expelled. And skin side down whenever you start cooking, and keep your fish from bowing. And by that I mean, if say you have a piece of salmon and you put it down in a hot skillet, it's going to have a tendency to that skin is going to seize, and it's going to cause your fillet to bow a bit, and it's going to inhibit your ability to get any skin contact on your skillet. And so what I would recommend is, if you have a glove, it might help, but just hold it down. You put your fish in your skillet, and you're gonna hold it down with the back of your hand, and you'll feel that skin start to release after about 20 or 30 seconds, and that's how you know that you can let it go, and then you'll be able to get a really nice solid sear on your fish. And then after that, once it's done, once it's done searing, you can flip it over to the flesh side, and you can continue the cooking there. And personally, the way I like to finish my fish, if you have the proper skillet, you don't want to do it if you have it, say oh shit, if you have, let's say, like a non-stick skillet, it is not going to be ideal. But if you have like a stainless steel skillet, or a cast iron, you're going to just throw it in the oven, like 400, until it's done, until however much you want it cooked. So, for cooking spices, one of the most important things to remember is that those spices, for the most part, all have oils inside of them, and you really want to toast those oils and those spices to get the most robust and fullest flavor out of them. So, for instance, if you got like whole cinnamon, like a whole stick of cinnamon, whole cardamom, allspice, all that kind of stuff, and let's say you're wanting to make some Indian food that night, if you don't have whole spices, what you can do is you can do what's called blooming your spices. So take your ground cinnamon, allspice, cardamom, and that kind of stuff, and whatever fat you're using. So let's say you're using ghee. You're gonna melt your ghee in your skillet, and you're gonna add all your spices, and you're gonna go over a low temperature, and you're gonna give those a nice toast. And what you're doing when you're doing that is you're actually infusing. Not only are you toasting those oils and the spices in the oils in those spices, you are infusing your fat that you are using to cook your dish in. You're infusing those with all those spices. So let's say you're making a soup, and you are sauteing all your onions and your garlic and ginger and stuff like that. You want to throw your spices in there, and it's going to again toast those spices and infuse that fat. So whenever you add your stock, tomatoes or whatever, that oil that has been, or fat that's been infused with all of your spices, is going to be more thoroughly incorporated into your dish, and it's going to add a much fuller flavor to your dish, and your final product is going to be it's just going to be much better, other than rather than throwing all your ingredients in and then you throw your spices in, and your spices haven't gotten a good chance to infuse into your dish. And same thing goes for if you decide to toast your spices. You're still going to want to add them in at the very beginning, to again infuse that oil, and so you get a better and fuller flavor in your end product. All right, so umami. What is it? Umami is um, it is sort of the extra sense, the extra taste that people don't really take in. I feel like a lot of people don't really take into consideration um, when they're cooking. So you've got sweet, salty, um, sour, bitter, and you've got umami. And umami, what it's going to do is it's going to add a lot of depth to the food that you're cooking. So uh, you find umami in natural sources, such as a lot of mushrooms. Um, I love using like shiitake mushrooms and trumpet mushrooms and uh, oh, what's the last one? It's on the tip of my tongue. I cannot think of it right now. Porcinis uh, are used a lot for umami. Other products you find it in is things like fish sauce, shoyu or soy sauce, um, uh, misos, balsamic vinegar, true real balsamic vinegar, um, and uh, proper utilization of umami. Like I said earlier, it just it does a lot to elevate even the most. You can make the most mundane sauce or whatever, but if you add just a little bit of umami to it, it can elevate it in a way that people aren't really expecting. For instance, one of my favorite things to do is um, I've had to make a lot of pasta sauces uh, for staff meal and all that kind of stuff, and um, a lot of the times what you'll do is uh, you know you'll take your onions, garlic, some fennel, your mirepoix and all that kind of stuff, and you'll saute it, and if you really want to, you can deglaze with some red wine and stuff. Add your tomatoes, blend it or whatever. Um, add some herbs and stuff to it, and you can make a good pasta sauce that way. But my absolute favorite thing to do is whenever you're deglazing with red wine is throw some fish sauce in, which sounds really weird, but you're not adding too much. Maybe 1 part fish sauce to 2 parts red wine. Throw it in there, deglaze, and that's all you got to do. And people are going to notice. And keep in mind that throwing something super salty like fish sauce in something like that is going to add seasoning. So you got to take that into consideration whenever you're seasoning. But even doing something as simple as that can add a lot of depth. Uh, and again, sort of that X factor that people are going to notice, but they're not going to know what it was that you did to that sauce to to make it just a little bit different, and just a little bit better. Another thing you can do, a lot of people, I feel like think they don't like mushrooms, and I was this way for the longest time. I generally not the biggest fan of the texture of mushrooms, but if you do a nice small tiny brunoise or mince it really fine, uh, and saute those mushrooms with your onions and garlic and stuff, when say you're making a soup of some sort, you can get that nice depth, a little bit of earthiness and a little bit of umami, but you don't have to put up with that, let's face it, rubbery texture that mushrooms can have, that can be sometimes off-putting to people who either just flat out don't like the texture, or people, some people are a bit more sensitive to certain types of mouthfeel, and it can turn them off, and that can be a great way uh, to use something like that. And also, small kids and stuff like that, it's another great way to um, add extra nutrients to something, and also just make it taste better. And they will never know that they're eating something that they don't even like. All right, so pasta. Next up, we'll talk about how to properly cook your pasta, um, and specifically, the one detail uh, is making sure that you do not put oil in your water whenever you boil your pasta. This is something that I grew up doing. I had always heard. Um, I honestly probably learned it from like Food Network, growing up watching it. Um, but the idea is, in case you don't know, is that whenever you boil your pasta, obviously, you run the risk of it boiling over on you. Um, and the idea is you add a little bit of oil uh, to your pasta water, and it will help prevent your pasta from boiling over. Um, and technically, yeah, it kind of can. However, that comes at the cost of whenever you finally add uh, your pasta sauce to your pasta, however you decide to do it, whether you do it the traditional method where you throw your sauce and pasta in a skillet all together and you toss it together, or if you're doing it the way I had it growing up, which is you put your spaghetti in a bowl and then you put your sauce over the top. Regardless, when you add oil to your pasta water, um, it is going to put a light coating of oil on your pasta, and it's going to prevent your pasta sauce from adequately sticking to it. And by extension, when you eat it, it is going to uh, not only is your pasta sauce going to run off of your pasta, but it will also affect the mouthfeel. So if you have oil on your pasta, it's also going to create a layer that's going to prevent your pasta and your sauce from properly combining homogeneously, uh, which for some people, it's bigger deal for some people than for others. Um, and so, um, if you want a better, more homogeneous sauce, you want your pasta sauce to actually properly stick uh, to your pasta, then you're going to want to make sure you omit any oil whatsoever uh, in your cooking process. Now, some if you're making homemade pasta, some pasta recipes call for, a little bit of olive oil, and that's one thing. If it's incorporated into your dough, uh, rather than coating your dough. Now, on the same thread of uh, um, properly coating your pasta and everything, and creating a good pasta sauce, uh, one thing that I uh, never really learned until I was in a professional kitchen is uh, the utilization of your uh, starchy pasta water, um, in your pasta sauce. So, for instance, uh, say you are making something like a cacio e pepe, which is something it's a very simple dish, but it's entirely technique driven. And if you don't do the proper technique, then you're not going to get the proper uh, final product. Or also something like a just simple like a Bermonte with some butter noodles or something, um, or aglio e olio, which is pasta. It's like butter pasta, but replace your butter with olive oil. Uh, you will, especially with something like butter or olive oil, you will never get a properly emulsified sauce without the starch from your pasta water. Um, and what that's going to do is it's going to act almost like like mustard would in a vinaigrette, uh, or an egg yolk specifically would in like a mayo or something along those lines. It's going to act as an emulsification agent, uh, to make sure you get a nice, smooth, homogeneous sauce rather than a broken sauce that is just not going to quite have the proper mouthfeel whenever you serve and eat it. And my next tip is, I guess I'll just go ahead and go into it. I'm only a few minutes out. To really, if you really want to raise your pasta game, what I have found is an ingredient called refrito, and it is at one of my old jobs we used it in almost. It was a basis for almost every single pasta that we used, and it is so simple and so underutilized. But all you do is you take roughly equal parts of garlic uh, and olive oil, and you're going to take your garlic, and you want to, if you have a mandolin, it's going to be the best thing to use. If you don't have a mandolin, you can just use a knife, and you want to slice your garlic as thin as you possibly can, um, and then combine them in a saucepan, and add. Honestly, it depends on how much you want. If you want it to be have a little bit more of a kick, you can add more, but you're gonna add some crushed red pepper flake, and you're going to set that over extremely low heat. Um, and I would normally let mine go for about 15 to 20 minutes, stirring every few minutes, so you make sure your garlic on the bottom doesn't brown or burn, um, and you're essentially going back to going back to uh, spices. You're doing something very similar here, where instead of infusing your oil with a bunch of spices, you're infusing it with your crushed red pepper flake and your garlic. And so, same idea. Whenever you start a pasta sauce, and you throw a little bit of that refrito in there, you you're getting all that nice garlic flavor right off the bat. You don't have to uh, you don't have to worry about sauteing your garlic or anything like that. You just already have a ready-made, solid, super solid basis for your pasta sauce, and you can use that for almost anything. I mean, you can build a tomato sauce off of that uh, from the base up. Um, you can use it for something like alioli olio. You can throw a little bit in with your butter noodles. It is a complete game changer, uh, and something that I've found that you can generally find, like, whenever you go and work in a professional kitchen, you can usually find at least one thing, even if it's not a very good kitchen, where you're like, yo, I really like that. I'm gonna make a mental note of that, or make a note in my notebook, and I'm going to take that to my grave, essentially. And when I found refrito at one of my old jobs, that was one of those things where I learned about that, and I have never looked back. And anybody who has cooked with it, or has ever used it, uh, any of my coworkers that have used it have felt the exact same way, where it was just uh, no going back. It's just like I said, it's just a complete game changer. All right, grilled cheese. Grilled cheese is something very near and dear to my heart as a white boy. Very classic dish from my childhood. Two slices of bread with absolute copious amounts of cheese, which is, in my opinion, the only proper way to make a grilled cheese. If you're not almost choking on the cheese as you eat it, there's not there's not enough cheese on it. And the issue that comes with that is, obviously, melting all that cheese is uh, not usually very easy. uh, but luckily, there's a couple of very easy methods to get as much cheese as you want on your grilled cheese, and still have it melted all the way through, so you don't end up like I don't know, Gordon Ramsay grilled cheese. If any of y'all have ever seen uh, the the video of him making a grilled cheese in a in a fucking cast iron skillet, uh, in a fireplace, and he cuts into it, and every single piece of cheese is still completely solid. Um, so if you have the right type of skillet, the easiest method is going to be to first sear your toast, throw your cheese on it, and essentially make like an open faced grilled cheese. So sear one piece of bread with your cheese on it, and then if you have like a cast iron skillet, or a stainless steel skillet that doesn't have like a rubber or plastic handle on it, uh, set your oven to broil, which is going to it's going to it's a heating setting that it essentially is only heat from the top. Think about it almost like I've described it as like an inverse of a grill. So when you're cooking on a grill, all of your heat is only from the bottom, but when you're broiling something, all of your heat is only from the top. And take one of your racks in your oven and put it on the very lowest rack, and just throw your skillet with your open faced grilled cheese in there. Uh, and be sure to keep an eye on it, because once it starts browning, it will burn your bread very fast. But watch it, and once your once your cheese starts to melt, pull it out. Obviously, be very careful, uh, because your shit's gonna be real hot. So pull it out, and then just continue as normal. Throw your second piece of butter bread on there, flip it over, finish searing, and that's it. That's money. All right. Now this next tip, I feel like when you say it, it sounds obvious. It's very like, well, duh, why wouldn't you do that? But it's something that even in a professional setting that I've run into an issue that I've run into a lot with people, which is making sure that whatever final product you're looking for, make sure you are cooking your product at the proper temperature. For instance, let's say you're making something like um, uh, something like a soubise or something like that, uh, where you're going to be cooking your onions in butter at a very low temperature until they're soft, um, and you want absolutely zero color on them whatsoever, which normally, you know, if you let onions set, they've got a lot of sugar in them. Same with butter. Butter burns very easily, um, uh, and so you run into an issue where if you are using the improper temperature when you are cooking, then you are going to end up with the improper final product. Um, Another example is uh, say you have a dish that calls for you to sweat your onions, um, and you have another dish that calls for you to caramelize your onions. Um, it's important to note that if uh, if you decide to caramelize your onions versus versus simply sweating them, as the recipe intends, you're going to again end up with a different final product. Um, some things this isn't a very big deal. You know, uh, oh, that's a wipe. Um, uh, for certain things, you know, making soup, a lot of soups and stuff like that, it isn't going to affect it all that much unless you're making something like French onion soup, where you literally need to be taking, you know, 45 minutes to extremely slowly caramelize your onions properly. Um, where it really comes into play is when you are cooking something like a protein. Um, or let's say you have a soup that has protein, uh, that has a certain type of protein in it. Like let's say you're making a beef stew or a chicken tortilla soup or something like that. Um, some people, their instinct is to, well, if I turn it up and I cook it, it's just going to cook faster, which isn't wrong, but it's not the way something like that would need to be cooked. You would need something like that to be cooked slowly, so your food cooks properly. You know, you have something like a beef stew or whatever, and you blast it. You turn it up to 10 on your stove, and you let it go for 30 minutes, as opposed to turning it on a 2 and letting it go for 3 hours. You're going to end up with a completely different product. I mean, uh, if blasting it, you're going to end up with a product that is, depending on what kind of beef you're using, it could be borderline inedible. Um, Versus something that's been very slowly cooked is going to fall apart in your mouth. You know, uh, oxtails are another prime example of this. You want to very slow cook your oxtail, so when you pull it out, your meat isn't tough, but it's basically falling off the bone. Same thing with, you know, ribs. Same reason you don't take those and cook them for 20 minutes in a smoker at 400 degrees, is because that's a tough cut of meat and you need to cook it slowly for all that connective tissue to properly break down and for you to get a proper final product that's tender and that has, you know, the proper texture and is edible. But again, like I said, it's one of those things that seems like common sense, but I've run into it a lot where people, especially in like a professional setting, they want to get something done, and so they just turn it up and cook it as fast as possible instead of turning it down and cooking it at a proper temperature. Seafood is another big one because you know, beef, pork, chicken, those can all take, depending on the cut and depending on how you're cooking, they can take a while to cook. Fish is one of those things that is almost never going to take very long to cook, and so if you have a piece of fish that takes 5 minutes to cook and you blast it from start to finish for 5 minutes, you're going to get an overcooked piece of fish, as opposed to going back to one of my earlier comments about searing your the skin on your fish. You know, keeping it at a you know, maybe a medium high heat. Sear the skin on your fish. Turn your temperature down to a medium or a medium low, and flip your fish so that your fish goes slow until the end, and you'll end up with a much better product. And not only will you end up with a better tasting product, you'll end up with a visually more pleasing product, especially with something like fish, because when you absolutely blast it, you'll get I believe it's called albumin. It's the, if you've ever cooked fish, specifically something like, I see it a lot with something like salmon. It'll expel it out the side of the layers, and it just adds just not as aesthetically pleasing. It's not bad. It's not going to hurt you. It's just not as aesthetically pleasing, and it's a sign that you are cooking your either one of two things or both. You are either overcooking your fish, or you are cooking your fish too hard. Both of those can cause that to happen. So, all right, sous vide. So, if you're unaware what a sous vide is, it's also called an immersion circulator. And what it does is it's a contraption that moves water in a vessel and sustains a specific temperature that you set. So, say you have a steak that you are wanting brought up to a rare temperature. You can take a sous vide machine, take a vessel like a 12-quart container. Cambro is one of probably my personal go-to. And it's something that you'll find in almost any professional restaurant. Fill it up. Put your sous vide in there, set it for whatever temperature you want, and you're going to turn it on and wait however long it takes, depending on your sous vide, to get up to the temperature. And then you take whatever your product is, and you are going to put it in a vacuum sealed bag with whatever product you want it infused with. So let's say you're doing a steak. A usual go-to for that is like a pat of butter, a few cloves of garlic, and maybe like some rosemary or something like that. And you throw it in there for 30 or so minutes. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring your product up to that desired temperature, but it won't let it go over it. And so a reason you sometimes want something like that is, so let's say back on the instance of a steak as an example, you bring it up to a rare temperature, and let's say you're wanting your end product to be you want a mid-rare steak whenever you serve to your family. And so you throw it in and you bring it up to a rare temperature, but it doesn't go over that. And then when you pull it out of the sous vide, not only has it been infused with some nice buttery flavor, with some garlic and rosemary, without much hassle on your end, all you have to do when you get done is heat up your cast iron skillet or your grill or whatever you want to cook your steak in or on, and you just have to put color on it, essentially. And you don't have to worry about bringing your steak up to your cooking temp or anything, because your sous vide has already done that for you. So it's also really helpful, say you're wanting to do that, but you need to run some errands. Well, you do that, and then you turn it on, run to the store, get whatever you need, come back, and you're ready to cook. You don't have to worry about pulling your steak out, tempering your steak, or anything like that. Now, personally, this is just a personal preference. Jesus Christ, I personally don't like using a sous vide for steaks, just because it can have a tendency to fall apart, which I don't really care for. When you leave it in, it can have a tendency to act a bit like a slow cooker, and so that fat starts to render. Let's say you have a ribeye or something a cut that has a lot more fat in it. You've got that big strip of fat in between, right below your spinalis, which is the super marbled part that's on the cap of a ribeye, and that can cause your steak to start to fall apart whenever you take it out and before you cook it, which to me isn't as desirable. But for something like chicken, it can be extremely useful, because obviously chicken isn't going to fall apart like a fatty marbled steak would. So say chicken is the same idea. Maybe set your sous vide to 150, leave it in there for an hour, and let it roll. And then whenever you're ready for dinner, pull it out, throw it in the oven or throw it on the grill, throw it in a skillet, whatever you're wanting to do, and you're shaving off time, but also it can in a way double as cook and marinade time, because you're essentially marinating your meat product while it slow cooks, and while it comes up to temp. Now, what I feel like a lot of people don't take into consideration as a use for a sous vide is something that products that do better going super slow at a low temperature, that's difficult to achieve via other methods in a kitchen. For instance, say you want to confit some garlic in olive oil or something. The usual method is to take some garlic and either put it in a saucepan or put it in like a stob pot or something, in the oven at a super low temperature. But let's say you don't want any color on your garlic, and both of those methods are going to put some color on your garlic. You can, or let's say you don't want to have to worry about it. You don't want to have to think about it. You know, if you throw your garlic uh, in the oven, you can't go and run an errand. You know, you need to be there or your garlic will burn and your oil will burn, and then you have a mess on your hands. Um, if you have a sous vide, you can throw your garlic and your olive oil um, into a bag. Set your temperature to 180 or whatever temperature you want. Throw your bag in there and go and do your errands for the day. And you have that going uh, all day, slow cooking, and then you come back and you did not have to have any hassle worrying about whether or not you were going to burn your garlic or uh, or your oil or anything like that. So, in my opinion, it's also really good for that. It's also I've used it professionally for doing. Um, and this is a much longer. Oh, fuck. Much more long term. Project, but if you ever want to make shoyu, um, there's an expedited process that you can use a sous vide for. And same thing with garum. And garum, if you've never heard the term, just think of fish sauce, uh, which is a garum. It's essentially fermented meat sauce. It's like soy sauce, but if you replace the soybeans with a meat product of some sort. So in obviously in the case of fish sauce, it would be fish, specifically anchovies. But yeah, um, just something to think about. You know, if you have a sous vide, there can be you know, confit garlic is just an example. Say you've gotten an olive oil and you want to infuse it with something, uh, with a flavor of some sort, you know, spices or whatever. You know, same idea. You take your oil, put it in a vac seal bag, throw your spices or whatever ingredient you're wanting to do, uh, whatever ingredient you're wanting to infuse, and and just leave it for however long you want. The only thing you gotta do is if you do it for, you know, a day or so, you just have to make sure you are checking your water level so it doesn't get too low. All right. So our last topic today will be just things to know when you're using ingredients uh, like misos, shoyu, um, honey, ingredients like that have uh, essentially almost like a live ingredient, and not live is in like in the same way that like yogurt is a live bacteria culture. Um, but these are ingredients that when you can avoid it, it is best to avoid exposing them to high heat, because there are a lot of uh, volatile components in them that you'll lose once you start heating them up. So, for instance, with honey, uh, when you have fresh honey, And obviously it depends on what kind of honey you have. For those of you that don't know, honey can vary wildly uh, based on um, based on what the bees have been feeding on. So, for instance, an ingredient like or a honey like buckwheat honey is going to be very, very dark, almost bitter, very robust. Uh, and when I say dark, I mean like darker than maple syrup. It's a very extremely almost black honey. Um, Versus something like acacia, that is going to be much lighter in color, extremely light gold color, and a much more delicate and lighter flavor to it. And and I would almost say like a refreshing flavor. And and once you take a product like that and you heat it up, you're going to lose a lot of nuance, for better or for worse. In some things, that's what you want. In some things, it's kind of um, uh, it's unavoidable. You know, you're not going to be able to create a burnt honey caramel uh, with that bright, fresh honey flavor. But it just leads to a much flatter uh, flavor from your product, um, as opposed to uh, again like a brighter flavor. For something like miso, it's very similar. You'll get a much flatter flavor from your miso. So um, let's say you have you're making some wings and you want to you're making a sauce with some soy sauce and some sugar and some ginger or whatever, and you're heating it up on the stove to make almost like a syrupy coating for your wings. um it's tempting, and it seems understandable to take like a bump of miso if you want to throw it in, taking a bump of miso and putting it in as it cooks. Um, but what you're much better off doing is making your sauce and cooling it down, and then taking your miso and mixing it in. Then that way you don't expose it to any sort of high heat, and you'll get there's so much depth and nuance to misos, because whenever you are making miso, you're essentially working with a living ingredient. You are using a mold to break down your starches and amino acid, or sorry, your starches and your proteins into amino acids and sugars. Um, and so again, whenever you heat it up, you lose a lot of those volatile compounds that add those nuances um, to uh, uh, to your product. And the same goes for shoyu, because the process for making shoyu is very similar to the process of making uh, uh, miso. The only difference with shoyu is you have a tendency to get some alcohol production, which, again, if you know anything about cooking alcohol, when you cook it, you cook out your alcohol. And so, um, uh, again, while you can still get a good product, and you'll still get that depth from the umami that I talked about earlier, um, you can still elevate it even further by choosing when you actually add your um, your miso or your shoyu or your honey, or whatever product you're looking to use that's similar to those. So anyway, guys, wow, that is some wildly perfect timing. Um, for me to finish this dungeon right as I finish all my talking points and finish my stream. But appreciate you guys joining today. Like I said, here in the next couple of days, if you have any desire to refer back to this, it will be posted on my YouTube channel, which is, the link is posted in the description for my Twitch channel. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. It really means the most. If you enjoyed my stream today, consider giving me a follow. It would mean the world to me. And hopefully I will see you guys in a later stream on, what's today, Tuesday, on Thursday. So y'all have a great night.